Lepore, what do you think of the Edmonton Oilers early on in the season? Because I guess we could say they haven't lived up to expectations, or maybe they're the
Yeah.
team we thought they were going to be, right? With their lack of depth, how they only rely on McDavid and Draisaitl, it seems, to generate all their offense. But what did you notice from the Oilers taking on the Leafs in week 2?
The Oilers are really funny to me. Like, I don't know about you, but if I look at all the teams in the Canadian division, the Oilers are the team that I think most that if someone told me the Oilers were going to win the division, I wouldn't have been absolutely shocked just because of McDavid and Draisaitl. But then at the same time, if you told me they were going to be an absolute disaster, I wouldn't be surprised either. And looking how the season's going so far and watching a lot of their games, it seems like it's going to be the latter, man. Like they do not look good. You mentioned how much they rely on McDavid and Draisaitl. Like, it is obvious how much they rely on those two guys. And you look at their lineup, man. It's like it's almost hard to do, like how bad that lineup is, and like things that just are completely perplexing. Like, you have the best hockey player on the planet playing with Cassian. Like, how?
It's unacceptable.
It's like what like how is this even a thing? And then even they talk like he plays with Nugent Hopkins on his other wing, and you hear all these things. Oh, how much Nugent Hopkins loves it in Edmonton and this and that. Yeah, well, no fucking shit. He's playing with Connor McDavid. Like, who else is he gonna play with anywhere else? Give me a break. And like, now I'm gonna be the Leaf fan who pisses Oilers fans off. All that talk about McDavid and Matthews training together in the summer. Imagine how it feels to be on the ice with Matthews shooting the shit. He sees this guy who he knows he's better than. And he knows, like, deep down, McDavid knows he's the face of the league. He's the best player in the league. And he looks across the ice and he's like, that guy who's playing in my city gets to play with Marner, Tavares, and Nylander. I can't even get one of those guys like on my wing. My other star player plays on another line. It's just bad, man. Like the Oilers, I don't know. Like I look at that team and I'd like for someone to point something out to me that they do in the lineup that really truly helps McDavid. I can't even think of something. Like they try to patch things up, getting like Barry and Turris, and I'm just like, man, like it's bad in Edmonton, bad. And you know what, man, I'm gonna say it. Of all these things that we can point to with the Oilers, and as bad as they are, I think the thing that might drive me most nuts is, where the fuck does Mikko Koskinen get off wearing number 19? Like, has someone not told him that a goalie should be 1 or 30 or
yeah, that 35? Doesn't make any sense.
Holy fuck. Like, how's that even allowed?
Because first of all, if you were good, you can get away with that.
Oh my God.
But when you're out here allowing, 4 to 5 goals a night and your team is just getting shellacked, even though McDavid and Draisaitl are seemingly going off every single night, you have some issues.
That's just it. Like, I'm watching McDavid, and like I mentioned before with certain players, how like, okay, they're a threat every time they're on the ice. No, Connor McDavid is a threat every time he is on the ice. It's like that little jump he gets and you sit up. Not even like, ooh, it's a half chance. No, like I feel like he's going to score every time he gets the puck. And to know that you have that player, and then you have another player who's a Hart Trophy winner, and you're still bad, that's hard to do.
Lepore, I think it's flat out embarrassing the way that this team has not been able to take the next step, despite having
it's crazy.
Who I think are 2 of the top 5 players in the National Hockey League.
No question.
Now, listen, we all think McDavid's the best player in the league. I don't think you can dispute that. There are some people who think that Draisaitl defensively lacks a little bit. But listen, Draisaitl is one of the top 5 offensive players in the game. Okay, yeah. These two are dominant night in and night out. And for this team to not get past the second round of the playoffs in the McDavid era is a complete embarrassment.
Well, we thought that year, it was kind of the whole feeling of like the Oilers have arrived. Like we thought like this is going to be the next 10 years.
Yeah, you thought they were just going to keep getting better and better and better. Yeah. And their inability to surround those two guys with players that they should be playing with players that they can, create offensively and dominate games with, it's just not happening. And I just look at some of the players on that roster, and it's like you said, right, with Zach Kassian, we even talked about Joe Thornton, how he should be demoted from the Marner and Matthews line. And Leaf fans are, complaining about Joe Thornton, who should be on the first line, who should be playing with Tavares and Nylander. And then the Oilers are putting Zach Kassian out with the best player in the world.
Yeah. What was McDavid thinking? What was McDavid thinking when he feathered that pass to him that would have iced the game and Kassian hit the crossbar? Oh, like where am I? Like, he's got to just have his hands up in the air. Like, where am I?
I can't even imagine what he's going through. And then I look at the defense core as well. And I know Oscar Klefbom's out for the year, and he's a really good player. I like Oscar Klefbom.
I like Klefbom.
Now I don't think he's like a legit number one defenseman, but I think he's a really good, 20-minute per night defenseman. He can run the top power play unit, moves the puck well. But then you go down, and I like Darnell Nurse. And Adam Larson, he's out there. He does his job. He blocks shots. He hits guys. He's, for the most part, he's solid. He's not contributing anything offensively. Tyson Barrie so far, hasn't really done much.
There's a lot of laughs on Twitter of those slap shots going high and wide for Leafs fans saying, yeah, I remember that.
a lot of what we saw last season. And I'm just looking at that roster. And then, like you said, with Koskinen and that goaltending and bringing back Mike Smith, and it's like, how are you not able to assemble a better team with two of the top 5 players in the world?
How can you not convince people too? Like, people talk about Edmonton and people not wanting to play in Edmonton. If you're a winger, you're going to play with Draisaitl or McDavid. That's pretty enticing, man. And like, maybe I don't know enough about those logistics, but from what I do know, that's pretty enticing if you're a player. Even if it was a short-term deal. Like, even if you were a guy like Taylor Hall, who wanted to go there short term and play with one of those guys, light it up for the year, and then move on to a bigger contract. They can't convince, quote unquote, that guy to do that. I mean, it's very perplexing. It's bad, man. Edmonton's in a lot of trouble. And like, I mean, I grew up loving Gretzky's. They're kind of the Oilers. They're kind of like in my heart. Like, they are in trouble. And I'm interested to see where it's going to go, like in the short term and like the medium term as well. Like, things are going to happen. Like, I really see things happening there and moves and maybe something dramatic, man. But like, even looking at that game, like, and like how bad that game was, I was listening to Spin Chicklets and they had Eichel on, and he raised my eyebrows a little bit and some of the stuff he was talking about and pointing out that like there was no, you forget that there was a very short training camp. Some players hadn't played since March. Like, weird circumstances, even guys had a hard time training in the offseason because of lack of facilities, this and that. And he kind of made me think about how bad that game was against the Oilers. And you've seen a lot of weird things happening, like crazy high scoring games, teams getting blown out, duds like that one. If I remember correctly, the Bruins went 3 games without an even strength goal. Like how does that happen? Like, we're seeing really weird things. Do you think what Eichel was talking about is playing into this kind of weirdness and ugly games both ways that we're seeing early in the year, like high scoring games, very low scoring, boring games, some bad play? Like, you think can you point to that? You think it's fair to point to all that?
Oh yeah. I think that's definitely a factor, because when you look at the lack of training camp, no preseason games, players aren't as sharp as they normally would be. And if you look at just a regular off season and training camp and preseason, guys still come into the year and there's high scoring games, right? So now add on to the fact that we're dealing with COVID and, obviously everything was just sort of happened so quick and we just jumped into the season. I'm not surprised one bit that we've seen some ugly games so far.
Yeah, and even no preseason. Like actually think about that for a second. Zero preseason.
Yeah, because you don't get a chance at all to, figure out line combinations. And yeah, you could have your intra-squad games and play around with things like that. But at the end of the day, even going back to the Leafs with like Thornton, Matthews, and Marner, it would have been nice if they had, 3 or 4 preseason games to work out the kinks and see if that worked. Or, maybe they could have tried someone else on that line. And then, saying all that, you look at a team like Edmonton, who isn't good defensively, whose goaltending is shaky, and you add in, no preseason, short training camp, that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
And so far, we've seen that with Edmonton. We've seen that with the Vancouver Canucks. I believe they're dead last in the league in goals against.
Yeah, Pettersson's had a terrible start.
Yeah, Pettersson has 2 points in the first 7 games.
Terrible. Oh, my God.
It's a disaster for that team as well. But But yeah, I mean, when you look at the Edmonton Oilers, and I even go back to their playoff series against Chicago in the qualifying round. So Chicago's one of another team that got lucky to make the playoffs last year with the format. During COVID, they got invited as I think they were the 23rd ranked team out of the 24 that came back.
I like how you say that. They got invited. Exactly. The NHL, man. They got invited.
They just said, come on down, Chicago. Yeah. Why the hell not? We already have, 2/3 of the league here. Get your asses down here. But no, it was, and then, McDavid and Draisaitl lit it up in the qualifying round. I think McDavid had 9 points in 4 games, and the Oilers lose in 4 games to the friggin' Blackhawks. Are you kidding me? You couldn't beat that Blackhawks team in a 5-game series. So yeah, I just look at all the problems they have.